Speaking of this was good, how about that Invisible Agent?
Yeah, it was okay.
Yeah, pretty much. I'd rather eat Twizzlers.
Well, they took a classic horror movie and kind of have a comedy sequel to it.
You mean The
It
Invisible
just
Woman?
seemed wrong.
You thought this was more comedy?
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought this was more adventure drama.
Yeah, sort of.
Well, before we get ahead of ourselves...
Wasn't horror.
Directed,
horror, sure.
no. Directed by Edwin L. Marin. Written by Curt Siodmak, same guy who wrote all the other Invisible Things. Stars Ilona Massey, John Hall, and Peter Lorre. And the leading lady, the love interest, got top billing over the star, which might tell you something about the quality here.
Yeah.
1 hour, 21 minutes. Oh, and this is from 1942, if we didn't say that earlier.
Nice and sharp and clear and, good,
Really good looking
quality.
for black and white, yeah.
Yeah.
Stouffer and Ikito, which is played by Cedric Hardwicke and Peter Lorre.
Which let's start right out by saying how ridiculous that was. Peter Lorre. Just being Peter Lorre, which is not a bad thing. And halfway through, I solidly realized, yeah, he's really Japanese.
He's wearing the little round stereotypical glasses.
But that's all.
And he's got kind of puffy, maybe kind of slanty eye.
He wasn't yellow-faced. He was just
He wasn't yellow-faced. He was just sort of
being
exaggerating
Lorre.
the eyes.
Well, he was acting, stereotypical a little bit, but...
Well, it's 1942. Japanese people in Hollywood were a little hard to come by.
I suppose. But,
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Yellow face,
Yeah.
black face, 20 years playing teenagers.
But it wasn't
all gets to
even
Kevin.
it wasn't even yellow-face, really. It was, Peter Lorre. And not one of his... I mean, for his performance, it was okay, but not one of his greatest roles, that's for sure. Anyway, carry on.
And the guy in The Werewolf of London was doing the yellow face, and you weren't that upset about him. Of course, he was the same guy that played Charlie Chan.
Yeah.
Sidney...
And I'm not saying
I can't
yellow
think of
face
his
is a
name right
good
now.
thing, but
Well,
at least it was yellow face.
in
It wasn't a white
1929
guy just being, look at
He
me.
was a white guy. He was Belgian.
Yeah, but he looked Asian. I mean, they made him up.
Okay, there was some makeup involved,
Yeah. You look at him and you thought, is that a white guy? You weren't sure. And it's like, Peter Lorre. It's a white
But,
guy.
in 1929,
Like,
there was no reason they couldn't have found a real Japanese or a real Chinese guy to play that character in
there was no
Werewolf of
excuse
London.
for that. Yeah.
You were not finding Japanese people in Hollywood in 42.
At least they had a somewhat of an excuse. But they had some Asian... Some of the other henchmen were Asian. They could have had an Asian actor.
Yeah, they did. You're right.
Put a Chinese actor, and Americans are not going to know the difference between a Japanese and a Chinese person.
Well,
in
not in
1942.
those days.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, these
carry
two
on.
guys break.
That was a lot of exposition.
First line of the review here. Yeah. Stouffer and Ikito go into Frank Raymond's print shop. They mention the name Frank Griffin, which is Frank's real name. He's the grandson of the original Invisible Man, which was 11 years ago, so we don't know the grandson thing. But they claim that they know that he still has the invisibility formula. He claims he doesn't have it, so they search the place. They threaten to cut his fingers off if he doesn't tell them where it is. But he distracts them and escapes. When Frank goes to the police, the U.S. government now wants the formula as well, but Frank refuses to give it to them.
And apparently they've known for a while that he's really Frank Griffin and probably has the formula.
Because apparently this is a secret to no one.
Yeah.
World War II then breaks out, and he changes his mind, but only if he can be the invisible agent. Give you my secret if you let me be the boss.
And he's instantly qualified to be an agent.
The government debates this for all of 20 seconds.
Yeah, and then he's a paratrooper and a secret agent.
And he's a good paratrooper and secret agent.
All of a sudden, yeah.
Yeah.
Without any training, without any...
Well, I mean, you could be pretty good at it being invisible, but being invisible doesn't mean you know how to jump out of an airplane in the middle of the night.
All of a sudden, yeah.
Over enemy territory where they are shooting at you. So they send him straight to Berlin to learn all the secrets. He takes the formula, parachutes out of a plane over Berlin, and undresses on the way down.
Injects himself before he jumps on the plane and becomes invisible on the way down, which was a pretty good special effect.
Yeah.
He's taking his clothes off, and he's invisible. The clothes are leaving.
The Nazis see him come
underneath.
down, but they can only find an empty parachute. He then steals a jeep and drives to Berlin. He meets up with his contact, an old coffin maker, who sends him across town to meet Maria, his real contact. Her boyfriend, Carl, from the High Command, shows up and treats Maria to dinner. And Frank, too, although he doesn't realize it at the time. Until the food starts disappearing. Where's your chicken, Carl? And he can't find it for some reason.
Well, and he's immediately sweet on her, and so he's given Carl a hard time, which you can do when you're invisible. And it's very, very comedic and, kind of slapsticky as he's baffling Carl, like, with all the various champagne tricks and chicken and bones and,
I saw the spy side of it. You saw the comedy side of it.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, he brags about his conversation with Hitler, and the Fuhrer wants to attack the USA, and he's even set a date for the attack. Throughout the meal, food and drinks keep spilling on Carl mysteriously. Carl gets mad and leaves, and Frank puts on a robe and then covers his face in cold cream. He then passes out on her couch. Carl goes to see his boss, who turns out to be Stouffer, who we'd seen before.
Mm-hmm.
He tells about a strange dinner, and Stouffer doesn't seem all that surprised. Meanwhile, Maria wipes Frank's face clean and takes his clothes off, but he's still asleep.
And still invisible, so there's nothing to see, even though he's naked.
Presumably, she didn't take any liberties with this sleeping naked man in the room.
No, she wouldn't do that. No.
And if she did, we wouldn't see it. I didn't see nothing.
No.
Stouffer comes in and mentions that he's awaiting a secret file on the American invasion, telling this to Maria, alone in the room.
Mm-hmm.
Frank follows him out. It's clearly a setup, since Stouffer knows about the invisibility. Stouffer confronts Frank in his office, and they start a fire, and the room fills with smoke, but we still can't see Frank.
Well, Frank starts the fire to get away, because he's locked in the room.
Frank grabs the book with the spies' identities and goes down the fireman's ladder. He gives the book to the Allies and then calls Maria again. Now, Baron Ikito, Peter Lorre, the Japanese man, calls on Stouffer and wants his book back. Stouffer borrowed the book as bait for Frank, never intending to actually lose it.
But he did.
They're allies, but clearly not friends. Frank goes to see Carl and gives him a long speech about how evil the Nazis are. Carl tells Frank about the invasion plan for New York. It's tonight. Frank then knocks out the guards, and he and Carl leave the cell. Stouffer captures and tortures the old man who is Frank's contact in the spy network. Frank blames Maria, and sure enough, she screams as Baron Ikito drops a net full of fishhooks over him. These are big old fishhooks.
Yeah.
She wasn't involved in the plan to capture him, but she was the bait.
But she was an unwilling pawn.
Yeah.
She was the bait. Yeah.
Ikito confronts Maria in the Japanese embassy, and this is the point where we figured out, he really is
he really
Japanese.
is supposed to be Japanese, yeah.
And Stouffer raids no accent or anything.
No, just,
Peter Lorre's got his own kind of accent.
He was
himself.
He was being Peter Lorre, which is not a bad thing, but
this time
not
it
Japanese.
Stouffer raids the place. Frank steals Maria away. Baron Ikito throws Stouffer across the room using karate and then stabs him to death. And Peter Lorre's like 3 feet tall, and Cedric Hardwicke's a full-size man, and he just wires for sure on this one. Ikito then clears the room and commits...
It wasn't really him doing that?
Yeah, probably not. Ikito then clears the room and commits seppuku, and we have no idea why.
That was kind of unclear.
Because that's what Japanese people do at the end of the movie.
I guess.
Prison guards catch up with Carl and kill him. No loose ends here. Frank and Maria then speed to the airport, where Maria steals a Nazi plane and flies them home. Once they take off, they circle around, and Frank bombs the planes on the runway.
The ones that are going to attack America.
Very ones that night, yes. As they approach England, Frank has passed out again, and the Brits shoot at them, so Maria grabs Frank and they parachute out. Eventually, Frank wakes up and explains that Maria really was one of their agents. He smiles and laughs, the invisibility is worn off, and he's normal again. The end.
Happily ever after.
Except somewhere down the line, Frank mentions that he only has a couple vials of invisibility formula left. He doesn't really know how to make it.
No.
So at some point, this stuff's going to run out, right?
Yeah, you'd think so.
And what about him going insane eventually when it wore off? Because it doesn't normally wear off.
I don't know.
They've changed the rules on this again, haven't they?
They did change the rules, yes. Yes, they did.
Consistency.
Yeah, inconsistency. Yeah.
The original Invisible Man and Invisible Man Returns were pure horror movies. The Invisible Woman was mostly a comedy, and this
that
one
wasn't related. The Invisible Woman was a different scientist and a different process, and
Still Universal.
it was still, but
there are still connections, but yeah, that's
well,
not
not
related
as far
to Griffin
the
or
Griffin,
anybody. Yeah.
the Griffin family. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
This one is sort of an adventure story.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't see as much humor in it as you did, but it was there. Mm-hmm. The special effects do continue to improve. Mm-hmm. There's a scene where he's in the bathtub and soaps himself up.
Oh yeah, that was impressive.
And another
yeah.
where he puts on the makeup, and
You
both
can
look
see
very
the suds,
realistic.
Just the suds.
Yeah, just the suds.
Yeah, that was neat. Yeah.
Cedric Hardwicke played Cobb, who was also the main villain in The Invisible Man Returns.
Once you get an
Stouffer
actor you
in
like,
this, Cobb in, but in the same franchise?
yeah, they do.
That's
that.
like having two
they
different...
did that. Yeah.
That's like, yeah, well.
Yeah.
It seems odd that Universal would recast him in a different character in the very same series of films. Mm-hmm. It took a very long time to realize that Peter Lorre was playing Baron Ikito, a Japanese man. Mm-hmm. How a Japanese man got the title Baron is never answered. You don't have barons in Japan.
No, not so much. Yeah.
Now that I think of it, there probably weren't a lot of genuine Japanese actors in 1942, so I guess this one can sort of be excused. Mm-hmm. There's no mention of Frank eventually going insane here, so somewhere down the line, the problem with that drug has been solved. Frank's speech to Carl is clearly anti-Nazi propaganda.
It certainly was.
And since this was released in the middle of the war, that was a priority. Mm-hmm. The story is not particularly interesting, but it looks like this was Universal's bid to help the war effort.
Made the Nazis look like buffoons.
It did.
Yeah.
There's no way that the bombers in Berlin could possibly have flown to New York City at all, much less that very night. So someone in the writer's room didn't do the math.
Yeah, they were small planes, 1942 technology, flying we looked up from Berlin to New York is
and
just
both
under,
those cities were specifically explicitly mentioned.
Yeah, they were going to fly directly from Berlin to New York. That's just under 4,000 miles. And small planes max out at like 1,500.
Well, these were big bombers. But still,
they weren't that big, and a couple. Yeah, no.
If I remember right, it was a difficult thing flying over the English Channel to bomb Britain. United States was not an option.
Well, that was different issues. That wasn't that far.
Fair enough.
But distance-wise, I think there were other issues. But anyway, this was an absurd distance to expect in one continuous flight.
And overall, it's a weird blend of adventure, comedy, and deadly seriousness in parts. Best line of the movie. Stouffer says, "Sign this document that says we didn't harm you." He tells the old man that they tortured. The old man says, "I can't. You broke all my fingers." And this was one of the serious lines. This was not a joke.
It wasn't that serious. Yeah.
All right, well, what did you think?
I thought it was like a 3 or a 4. I didn't like it very much.
Yeah. Well, it's a 0 as far as horror goes. There's no horror here.
There wasn't horror movie.
For what it was, I'd go with 4. It was probably okay at the time because it was all... we still see movies today where Nazis are the bad guys, and they're usually over-the-top villains. These guys were, like you said, buffoons.
Yes, they were.
And you got to take it from when it was made. It was made during the war. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think you can excuse a lot of this because of that. As you couldn't do the same thing with Nazis today because we know too much about them. Mm-hmm. Back then, they were the mysterious enemy that we had to beat.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't like it. It was not good. Yeah. But I understand it a little better.
But yet it was included with the Universal...
The Shock Theater group,
Shock Theater group.
Yeah. Too many things in this group that are not really horror.
Yeah, they should have been more...
Yeah.
I'll see about that.
I guess it's hard to put out a package of horror if you've only got like 20 movies.
Mm-hmm.